Hey robot makers, hope you're having a good day so far. So this is a bit of a change to my normal routine. We'll have a relaxed and chill hangout and ask me anything. So we can talk about MicroPython, robotics, Raspberry Pi, Python, making and inventing, or even AI. I've got quite a few things to talk about to do with AI, some developments that we can definitely talk about there. So let's dive straight in. My name's Kevin. Come with me as we build robots, bring them to life with code, and have a whole load of fun along the way. Great. So let me just bring up my notes here. So there's a couple of things I wanted to share just off the top. One of them is there was a new release of MicroPython this past week. So let me just get over to my screen. Let me see if it's going to let me share this. I think I just need to flick between, I don't know, two things that, I think maybe they will. Right, so this is one of the new features in MicroPython 1.23, I think it is. And it's all about USB drivers. So this currently only is available for the Raspberry Pi 2040 type chips and also the SAMD ports as well as MicroPython, but I guess it'll work its way down given you know, the plethora of other chips that are out there. So this is one of the things that we've waited for a very long time with MicroPython. It's the availability and ability to use USB and pretend your USB device, your MicroPython. Grab one out of my my drawer here, for example. Little Raspberry Pi Pico there. I can pretend that that's a mouse, or not even pretend, I can say that that's a mouse, and it can get readings. If I had a little sensor on there for, I could make my own keyboard or whatever kind of input device I wanted to, and I can use the built-in USB driver or even create my own USB output using some pins, and that's something that I've been waiting for quite a while. I think you can do something very similar in CircuitPython, but regular MicroPython, that's been a long time coming. So really excited to get stuck into that after I've got back from open source in June. So I've got a busy month in June, lots of travel, so we'll talk about that a bit later on. But yeah, I thought that was something that might be of interest to you if you're followed the show. There's lots of good stuff to be had there. There's not many tutorials out on that yet, so I'll probably speak to Matt Trentini and Damien George and the rest of the team there, Jamie, to basically get you the tutorials on that, and so you can play along too. So that's one of the first things I wanted to show you. Oh, and there's another one as well. Let me just jump back to that. There's another new thing that's come out this past month, and that's Raspberry Pi Connect. So if you have a Raspberry Pi, you may have been using VNC to connect to your Raspberry Pis. Now, if you're using the latest version of Raspberry Pi OS Bookworm, you can actually install this RPI Connect software for free. And for free, you can access as many devices as you want to have. So, for example, I've just gone over to connect.raspberrypi.com. I've logged in, I've got an account on there. They're free to set up, and then you can click on Connect. You can do this from anywhere. You can do this from anywhere in the world. You can do it from iPads, mobile phones, and so on. The only thing that is a bit of a limiting factor at the moment is it requires a physical keyboard to input information and move around. So you can't, from your phone, click on a text field and the interface know that, because it's essentially just sending mouse movements and responding back with graphics. So on here I was just building out kevrobots.com earlier today, so I use Docker to do that. So I was very easily just connecting in to the Raspberry Pi using RPI Connect, and you get this little thing up here, so you can turn it off if you want to. I understand that they're also going to be building this out so you can do SSH as well, so you can log into terminals rather than having the full graphics experience. But it does only work on the latest version of Raspberry Pi OS, the Bookworm version. So if you've got a Raspberry Pi 4 or 3, you can still use this, you just have to be on that latest version there. So that's something else I wanted to sort of share with you there. So let's kick off. If you've got some questions to ask me, please put them in the chat. Put a Q in front of it just so that I know that it's a question. I'll be able to easily find them. And in the meantime, I want to sort of talk about one of the things that's been quite in the news this week, and it's all about AI. So on this channel, we've built our own AI models. We've used a lot of object detection. We looked at the very recent Raspberry Pi AI kit that came out just last week. So we did a video on that that's performing very well. And yeah, there's been quite a few things in the news that have been quite controversial. So one of the things is Adobe. they've changed their licensing very recently because they want to use all your content that you store on Adobe Creative Cloud, potentially. They want to be able to use that content to train their models so that their models can do generative AI. It can do other things like improve their language models. And essentially, that's a bit of a change in posture, because normally they would have used other content and actually using their customers' content without having to license it from the customers. Just because the customer's using their tools to generate content doesn't give Adobe free rein to be able to use that and profit off that themselves. So it's a bit of a change in direction, I think, there. So what I want to do before I get myself into any kind of legal trouble with this is actually pull up what Adobe themselves say about this. So I'm just going to pull up on screen here their content analysis frequently asked questions. They've got this machine learning frequently asked questions, and they talk in depth about this. So they're talking about how does Adobe analyze your content. So they're going to use a subset of AI, which is algorithms detecting and learning from data without human intervention to draw inferences from patterns and make predictions. So if you use Photoshop, you might be aware of some of their generative fill. You might be aware, if you can go into Adobe Express, you can type in something and it will generate an image from the text you type in. All of that technology requires on a whole cohort of images that exist and have been tagged already and have been put into their models for them to be able to generate new content. One of the issues they might have is, where do they get really fresh content from to build out their models? So what they talk about there, they talk about very limited circumstances where this might occur. They talk about we manually review your content for product improvement and development purposes in situations such as if you make your content public. So if you go to if you contribute to Adobe Stock or Behance, which is like a portfolio thing, you can have a website with all the things you've created on there. So if you're publishing something in the public domain, they're saying, okay, we have the right to use that in our generative models. I'm not sure what I think about that. I think if you're a content creator, then your livelihood depends on your creative output, and you require people to license your creative output potentially. So if you design, say, I don't know, a movie poster or something, you're essentially licensing that unless you're paid directly by that company for that content. So if you're paid directly, it might be that they own it outright, or it might be that they pay you for your effort and then they license it from you. Either way, you as a creative individual get recompense for that. So at this point, I don't see where the loop goes back round. That if Adobe are using content that you created with their tools and they're not giving you any reward for that, that seems to be a bit broken in my opinion. I think you should have some kind of reward for that. So let's talk about content live stream with Adobe Live. I'm assuming that live streaming is quite public, and again, it's kind of in the public domain. Content that you submit to be featured on Adobe Express, and content you submit as tutorials in Lightroom. And they've also talked about if you're involved in pre-release betas or early access programs, and there's a couple of other scenarios there as well. They also talk about the structure of files. So if you might have PDFs and they process only the structural elements and not include any text images. They are left alone in effect. So yeah, for me, the bit that's broken in that is that they're doing this and they're kind of the big brother in this situation. They are the ones with all the control, and you can either accept these terms or not. And it's as black and white as that. If you don't accept them, you don't get to use any of those creative tools, Creative Cloud tools. I've been using Creative Cloud since it existed. I've been an Adobe user right back in the 1990s using Photoshop, and then later on using Dreamweaver for doing web development. So I've been using Adobe Creative Cloud for a very long time, as long as it's been called that, in fact. So Adobe, I don't know how you pronounce that. Be interested to know what your preference is there. Right, I'm just going to scroll up there because I think there's been a few questions there already. So let me just get these up. Let me see, I think there we go. So Dan's got a question there. So are there any videos you created in the past, early days, that you wish more people had seen? You can't say all of them. So let me just load up kevsrobots.com because I do have a list of all my videos. Let me just go to... Is kevsrobots.com actually down? That was hilarious if it is. It looks like my website might actually not be online at the moment. I'll have to have a troubleshoot of that later on. So to answer the question there, Dan, is there any videos that I wish people would look more at? Well, I've got one of those, like, what's it called? That complex where you're imposter syndrome, that's it. So I always think that my videos are not very good anyway. Probably some of the MicroPython ones, I guess, I probably would want more people to have a look at, Dan, I think. I did a whole series on MicroPython, and yeah, I'd like more people to at least feedback on what they think about that. So Deshbu is saying, is there something like USB host in CircuitPython? I believe so. I've not done a lot of CircuitPython, but I know that you can set things up to be USB hosts, I think. I'll get back to you on that one. So let's see what else people are talking about on here. So how did I get into robotics, Ford asks. Great question. So I bought a 3D printer probably about less than 10 years ago, but more than 5, I think, somewhere around that mark. And I printed out a SMARS robot. I've got a whole host of them over there. These are these little small robots that you can entirely 3D print, and it uses an Arduino Uno as the main processor on there. And I had an Arduino. I remember buying that from Maplin's in the UK, which was like a Radio Shack type company. And you can do an awful lot of things with an Arduino, as you probably well know. And I loved the fact that you could build a robot out of this. And I went from that SMARS robot to thinking, right, I'm going to print out a 3D printed head. You can see, in fact, there's 2 there. There's one there and there's one just there. I went to printing out a full 3D printed human robot. If you go to inmove.fr, there is a model that you can download for free. There's an inventor called Gail Langveen who created this. Inmove.fr. Let me just show you that on screen. So here we go. This is the, there he is, Gail Langveen. Langvin, I don't know how you pronounce that, sorry, Gail. And yeah, you can build your own. So you can just go in here and you can start with a kit. And yeah, there's a full life-size version of InMove. So I wanted to learn how to do that. So I started 3D printing, I bought all the expensive servos and everything. And I quickly found that I was at my depth from a software perspective. So I didn't know enough Java because they had a lot of the back-end stuff in Java. So I thought, right, I need to back up a bit and slow down and figure things out. So I went back to the SMARS robots and I thought I need to master building small robots and then take steps one at a time to understand more about robotics, because I was hooked on this. I think there's something about if you understand the buzz that you get from programming, where you create something and it actually works and it can take inputs and it can respond back. It's like magnified by hundreds of times when you have something physical that you've created that can respond to physical inputs and it can work. And things like object detection, when you build that into robots, that can seem like magic. You can wave your hand and it can go backwards and forwards and things. And I was like, right, I need to learn how all this works. And I also understood that Raspberry Pis were built around Python. They had Python as one of the core parts of the reason to exist, if you like. That's where the Pi comes from in Raspberry Pi. Originally, the boards were going to run just Python, a bit like the way that a Pico or a Pico W runs MicroPython, only it doesn't have an OS. The original Raspberry Pis were going to do that, and then they changed to have a full operating system on there. Now, I did have a degree in computer science. I did that in like '98, and we didn't touch on robotics in there. We did quite a lot of computer architecture, low-level stuff, programming, lots of programming, but we didn't do Python. That was just not on the agenda at the time. So yes, several years went by, and then I thought, right, I want to learn how to build these little robots and build them out. So there wasn't a lot of online content around these robots, so I decided what I would do is I would create a website to pull together all the different modules and add-ons and code, and I'll build kind of a tutorial site where you could learn how to build these yourself. And that's where smarsfan.com came from. So smarsfan.com is another website, which is kind of the forerunner to kesrobots.com. I go to smarsfan.com. That website's up and running. Let's see, there we go. And yeah, that's the little Smars robot. It's entirely 3D printed. It has motors, has a little rangefinder at the front, and it uses an Arduino Uno as the main driver for it. So yeah, that's kind of what I started with, and I thought I haven't really got any video content. I've got lots of text content, lots of pictures and things, but no video content. So I thought I'll create some video content, and I'm not a great editor, so I'll just do live streams and just stick them on YouTube. And that's kind of how I got into live streaming about robotics. But I've always had an interest in robots themselves. I just love the idea that you can make something and it's almost human. It can do things autonomously. What's not to like about that? And it's also the intersection between programming, mechanical design, and electronics. So that sweet spot in the middle is where robotics sits. So Deshipu says, are you coming to mainland Europe this year? I am indeed. So I'm going to Rome Maker Fair in October. I think it's October 26th, 27th, something like that. I went last year and it was fantastic. So I'm going back again. I'm not holding a stall, I don't think, this year. Probably just going to be walking about. But I'll certainly be tweeting out about that. It's a fantastic event. It's a bit like Open Source or Maker Central or Maker Fair. Right, it is Maker Fair. It's just in Europe. Yeah, I got to meet Massimo Banzai last year, who's one of the co-founders of Arduino. He invented that. Johnny says he's already cancelling his Adobe license. I'm not surprised. I think it's quite a radical change to even uninstall. If you disagreed with the license that they were saying to change, you had to accept the license to be able to uninstall, to have access to the uninstall tool. That's just dreadful public relations, if nothing else. So I've got a question there from Donkey Poop Dragon. Fantastic name, that. I need to stream video in close to real time with good security from a camera on a Raspberry Pi over the web. How do you go about doing this, Kevin? So the good security, that's the challenge, I guess. So streaming video is not a problem. That's something that's pretty trivial to do with Raspberry Pis. You could use the built-in tools to do that, or you could perhaps create using Python and some Python libraries. You probably want an RTSM. Is it called RTSP? Let me just get the acronym right there. Real-time streaming protocol, RTSP. Yeah, RTSP is real-time streaming protocol. That's what I'm using right now to broadcast out to YouTube. And there is a Python library that you can download and use that will take an image source, a video feed, and it will then broadcast it. The challenge is securely. So how do you then present that securely? So you could stream that service to a web page. You could lock that web page down with something like Flask or Fast API, so only people that have the password to that site could access it potentially. That's probably how I go about that. You could also use things like Cloudflare to have a layer of protection on top of that. That's another option there. So Fud says duck Adobe. Fair enough. So James says, have you looked at Bleakon for Bluetooth low energy hotspots for connectivity with IoT devices? So one of the things I have looked at, and I've not built yet myself, I was thinking about how could you get a robot to position itself in 3D space or 2D space very accurately. What options have you got there? So you can have a LiDAR. That's probably one of the best options for positioning. But also, if you had Bluetooth beacons, you could essentially triangulate your position if you had more than 3 of these beacons that were at a fixed known distance. So you would have to put them in a room and measure the distance with a tape measure, for example, know which, where they are and model that. And then if you had a robot that could connect to them, it could measure the signal strength between each of them and work out where it is based on that triangulation. So you could use this Bleakon Bluetooth low energy hotspot to position your robot. It is something I have looked at briefly, but I couldn't find any good, reliable Python Bluetooth libraries. So one of the challenges with Python and Bluetooth is different on each platform. So if you use Windows, it's very different than if you use a Mac or if you use Linux. So there's like 3 different Bluetooth libraries available for all those different platforms. So writing some code that would be able to transport between the 3 of them is quite challenging. I think that's one of the reasons I stopped on that. Plus I hadn't found one that made that triangulation particularly easy to do. So yeah. Hey Adam, how's it going? So one of the questions I asked in the poll was, do you use ChatGPT or some kind of AI chatbot in your daily life? Adam just responded to that saying, I hate ChatGPT. I'm asking this because we're going to get into some more AI related stuff in a minute. So Donkey Poop Dragon says, large language models are a little overrated. I think they have their space. There's a place for them. They shouldn't be used to create like entire content without a human looking at it. I think that's a way to get into trouble very quickly. I think where they are good is, say you want to write I don't know, a difficult email, for example. You could use a large language model to help you craft that, because it will take out the emotion that you might be feeling right then and there and create something that means the same thing that you're trying to express, but without all that sort of toxic kind of language that might be in there. For example, it might be also, if you're looking to brainstorm, an idea, a book, a show, or something like that, you might use a large language model to help you give some structure to that, or a script. But it should always have, I think, your own language and tone of voice. I think they're best used as a tool rather than just to create entire loads of content. Deshbu says, why are you wearing a hat indoors? Because it's just part of my brand, isn't it? It's because I've a baldy head and like to keep my head nice and warm with a hat. That's what it's to do with. So Adam says, how much wood can you chuck if you could chuck wood? I can't chuck wood very far. I've not been very good at throwing ever. Small robots are the way to go. It's very true. Very true. Sam says the whole AI thing is overrated and falsely advertised. Let's give me an example where it's falsely advertised. I'd like to know more about that. Overrated. It depends on the use, I guess. There's been times where AI has been really useful. So for example, I do a lot of stuff with Canva, and Canva has a great tool for removing the background from an image. So say I wanted to remove me from this image here, remove the background. That's really hard task to perform with just like a pure non-AI based algorithm. So you could say, look at the contrast between like my face, like this bit here where my face is quite white and pink, and the background, which is very dark. You could have like an algorithm that could detect that contrast and it could pull that out. But then things like, where you can see, let me see on this side, where there's hairs there, for example, they're really hard to separate from the background. You can chroma key things out if it was like a green screen. But if it's not a green screen, if it's just like a background like this, particular background that's moving, that's really difficult to separate you from the background. That kind of segmentation analysis is hard to do. But machine learning is really good at doing that. That's one of the areas where it's great at separating things out. So Canva, for example, as a feature, they use AI to do that background removal. I think Apple use it as well, but they don't advertise it as such when you go to remove background on the preview app, for example, or images, photos app. So things like that, I would say they're not overrated, they're actually useful. I think where AI can be overrated is when people put it out there that it can do things that it's not great at doing. So for example, there's been a few things in the news recently about the humane pin that you can wear there, and also the rabbit device, and both of those have serious issues, I think, because they're very reliant on cloud-based services. I think the rabbit one, CoffeeZilla did a whole show about that. And essentially that looks like it's fraud from what I can see. They claim it can do things and it can't do those things. So that's just not overrated. It's fictitious. It's not a true claim. So that will allegedly anyway. That's my understanding of the rabbit. Whereas the humane pin, that's got many design flaws. I mean, what is the use case where that is a really useful tool? I think most people nowadays have, in the Western world anyway, have a smartphone with them all the time. So if they have that, why would you need a separate AI device separate from your phone? And then things like latency and lag, that can really break down the effectiveness of AI. So I think AI, to be really effective, needs to be on device. It'd be interesting to see tomorrow what Apple launch on all their new operating system upgrades, because I believe there's going to be a lot of AI integration into that. So Donkey Poop Dragon says, I think computer vision is close to the hype. So tell me more about that, Donkey Poop Dragon. I'd like to know what you mean more about that. Ford says, I think AI is like bacon. It's good, but it doesn't need to be in everything on Earth. Exactly. I think it should be selectively used for things where it's useful, rather than just looking at things and thinking, what else can I stick AI in? Can I make this screwdriver AI based? There's things where it's just not particularly useful. So David says, can you talk about about imaging Alpine Linux on a Raspberry Pi 3/4? I can probably talk about it. I've used Alpine Linux a lot in Docker. So when I build my Docker images, I've often used Alpine Linux because it's very lightweight, but I've not used it on a pure Raspberry Pi hardware. So one of the reasons I haven't done that is because, perhaps a Raspberry Pi, if you think the amount of effort and energy that goes into making Linux work on a Raspberry Pi, and then Raspberry Pi themselves then stack on top of that some custom libraries that are really designed to work well with the Raspberry Pi, if I want to put another operating system on there, I'm essentially throwing away all that investment and effort, and then I'm making things hard for myself, because they might, so for example, that power button that's on there, there might be some code that Raspberry Pi have written for the power management chip that isn't on Alpine Linux. So you're kind of fighting a bit of an uphill battle there, because who is going to create for that very specific version of Linux support for Raspberry Pi and for all the different versions of the board. So for me, I tend to stick with the kind of off-the-shelf Raspberry Pi OS, the bookworm that's been modified to work really well on Raspberry Pis. They've already done all that hard work for me. So for me, that's kind of my choice. But when it comes to like using Alpine in Docker, I've used that quite a bit. I can probably look at that if I go back to that Raspberry Pi screen share thing, and I just pull this up. I'll probably show you an example of that. I'm not sure which one I'm actually using on kezrobots.com. We shall have a look in the file. So if I go here and I go into, let's see, let me just see where I am there. So I'm in Clustered Pi. Let's go to Stacks and Kev's Robot. So in my Clustered Pi repository, which is on GitHub, I've got these stacks, which is like a Docker term for collections of containers, and in here I've got this Docker file, Docker compose file. So if I just do cat docker-compose.yaml, let's see on there. So I'm basically just building the image, so I need to look at the Docker file. So let's just look at the Docker file, and let's just scroll back a bit. So on this one, I'm not using Alpine, I'm actually using Ubuntu, and that's probably because I ran into some issues with Alpine, because it's so bare bones. You have to add like a lot of extra things in to get it to work, whereas Ubuntu is pretty beefy and has everything you need. So for me, when I am building out an image for Docker, particularly for building websites like kezrobots.com, one of the challenges is getting all the dependencies for Jekyll to work. So Jekyll requires Ruby, it requires a few different plugins, Ruby plugins, and I've had times where things work fine and all of a sudden it'll just stop working and I can't figure out. So going back to Ubuntu, even though it's quite chunky, like quite large file format, quite a large image, I'll basically just go back to that because it just works. So I hope that answers some of your question. Let me know if there's anything else you need to know on that. Daisy Poo says everything is better with bacon. Don't insult the bacon. Bacon soap, that's a good point. Not everything is good with bacon. Bacon soap might cause problems with your pets as well, potentially. Bacon gumballs. I think I finally understand how to work out the base resistor for a transistor. Rub some bacon on it. Is that the answer of how that works? So the question there, have you heard about Microsoft's recall feature? So funny you should mention that. Let me go back to here. because I have, let me just disconnect from that and close that out. I actually have this ready to talk about. So yes, I have heard about Microsoft Recall. So for people who are not aware of what Microsoft Recall is, it's only available on the Copilot Plus PCs that will be shipping in June, so it's not available to everyone yet. And I understand that it's also not going to be available on Intel x86 architecture. It's going to be like ARM only on these Copilot Plus PCs, and it's because it's quite intensive on the whole neural engine. It requires a couple of processors dedicated to doing the image recognition. So what Recall does essentially takes a screenshot of your Windows desktop every 5 seconds, stores that in a vault, and does some background analysis on that, does some optical character recognition for text, and I think it also looks to see generally what it can see in that image that it's captured. So if you're watching a YouTube video and there's like a lady in a, I don't know, pink shirt or something, it will put it'll convert that image into text, and it'll say, you know, YouTube video, woman in pink shirt, for example, and it will time snapshot that as well. So weeks later you could say, what was the name of that YouTube video? I remember there was somebody with a pink shirt in it. It'll then be able to find that because it's doing a text search for that. That's kind of the idea behind it. Now, this obviously has massive privacy impacts. So is it a step too far? What are your thoughts on that as a concept, first of all? Microsoft were going to have this enabled by default, and they very recently this week pedaled back on that a little bit and said it's an opt-in. But usually with these things, Microsoft has a habit of either accidentally making that so that it's not an opt-in anymore and it's on by default, or later on they'll just push the button and make it so that it's on by default and you have to opt out of that. Now for me, this has got several different concerns. It creates a honeypot for hackers, because currently hackers can't very quickly access a single file to see what you've been up to over the past couple of months on your PC. Things like what if you have somebody's private information on screen? Say you're doing like a workplace, what they call it, display screen equipment assessment, and you're typing in that you have some medical conditions, you've got a back problem and you're taking some medication for that. You might type that into the screen, the screenshot will be taken, it'll then be stored on your device that you have this medical information. A hacker could find that, they could use that. It is supposed to be secure, this, but already people have hacked this already to prove that it isn't secure. So there's lots of privacy concerns around this, and it is creating this honeypot of information that doesn't currently exist. And really, is it worth it for the payoff for the just in case you want to search for things? Microsoft do say that you can exclude banking apps, banking websites from this, but this is a manual exclusion. You have to kind of go out of your way to type in the websites you want to exclude from this. So things like credit card numbers, bank details, bank balances, all that kind of stuff that could potentially make its way into this this repository of information. Some other things I thought would be worth just mentioning on this. So I use an Apple Mac, and Apple have had a feature called Time Machine for the past 16 years. So they brought out in OS 10.5 Leopard, as it was called then. They had a feature called Time Machine, and that can take backups every hour or however often the files change, and then you can hit a button and you see this kind of time machine. It looks like the Finder window, but like it repeats back into time, and you can type in search words to find the contents of a file or a file that you might have deleted weeks ago. So it's a backup system, but it's similar, if you think about it, to this recall feature, because there is a history of things and they've been indexed. So Apple already have this, and it hasn't caused the kind of controversy that Microsoft have received with this. And I think it's because of the addition of AI. Because Apple have done this, and it's just file backups, it's not a snapshot of your desktop. That seems a little bit more invasive. It's a little bit more Big Brother. Now, Microsoft are not storing this in the cloud currently. this feature is the idea of is that it will store on your machine locally, and it can use up to 250 gigabytes of space, which is like ridiculous amounts of storage in my opinion. And it will pause if it gets down to 25 gig free space, so it won't eat up all your space. But that sounds like a lot of storage, a lot of processing power for little payoff, in my opinion. That doesn't seem to be worth it. Now I know that there's explaining computers. Chris has done an excellent video on that that is released today, so go and check that out if you've not seen that one already. That's an excellent feature. What would you think about this feature? Is there any upside? Is it a really good idea and people are just being Luddites, or do you think they've just taken a misstep, or is it just miscommunicated? Like I said, Apple have had something similar for 16 years and nobody's bothered about that. So Adam says that Manu, the new Raspberry Pi AI kit, if I work out how to use it, could answer to one of my problems. It'd be interesting to know what problem that is. So yes, we have the new AI kit. I've actually taken the Halo module out of mine and put it into a different thing just to see if it works compatibility wise. We'll have a look at that a bit later on if you want. That's the Pineman 5 case that I've got on my desk currently, which is just here. So I've got the Halo module in there currently. I'll do a show about that when I get back. Use it for the Format C command trigger. Hello and Ipsum Amet. That's a fantastic username there. So Charles says that well said. So there's a statement there. So I have an idea to create a real life BMO Adventure Time using Raspberry Pi and fine tune the local large language model and can run retro games, etc. Is that possible? Right. Yeah, absolutely, it's possible. So we did a show not too long ago on Ollama and how to use Ollama on a Raspberry Pi 5 without any kind of extra hardware, just running on the standard Raspberry Pi 5. And you could have a text-to-speech a voice recognition and a text-to-speech if you want it to speak back. You could basically just do a voice-to-speech using something like Vosk, which is a Python library that can convert sound locally on your device without cloud to text, and then you can put that text into Ollama, it can feed some output, and then it can speak the output. There will be a bit of a lag because obviously Raspberry Pis are not the fastest machines out there. But yeah, you could certainly do that. That's definitely possible. You could definitely build a robot to chuck some wood. That is definitely something there. So am I buddies with other tech YouTubers? I am. So I've got quite a few friends. I'm looking forward to meeting Jeff Galing next week. So he's going to be at Open Source. I've met him virtually. I did an interview with him for the Raspberry Pi 5 launch, and we've conversed many times over Twitter and other social media sites. And he even took one of my projects, which was the PyCon camera that I made. He took that and did a video kind of extending that himself. And I'm also friends with Chris from explainingcomputers.com and Dan, who's also on this channel as well. So Dan makes things. I met him at Maker Central a couple of weeks ago in Birmingham. So yes, we all have friends. We're all friends with each other. Matt as well from Not Enough Tech. I'm friends with him too. So yeah, we often chat about various different things. So would I like to come to MakerCast once again? Absolutely, I really enjoyed that. That was a really good hangout chat with yourself and Chris and the other guy who's got loads of subscribers whose name I can't remember while I'm live streaming. So Adam says, falsely advertised, calls sophisticated programming artificial intelligence. But is that not what artificial intelligence is? It's not real intelligence, it is just algorithms. I mean, artificial intelligence can be an if statement, because that could be artificially intelligent. It could be doing something that appears to be intelligent on the face of it. You're kind of going back to Turing tests to see, and Turing tests were passed a decade ago, weren't they? There was, if you remember, there's a really early program. I remember there's a book by Joseph Weizenbaum who he was talking about. I don't know if he invented it, but Eliza, the psychiatrist. So somebody created a robot psychiatrist. It was essentially just a clever text model, and you would ask it would ask you a question, and if you answered, it would take elements of that answer just using some kind of sentence detection. It would pick out verbs and nouns and things like that, and then it would echo back and ask you more about that. And it asks in a very consultative way that sounded like a psychoanalyst, a psychiatrist, and it was one of the very first chatbots. And famously, even though somebody knew that this was a chatbot, they found it to be valuable to have this kind of reflection back when it asked them questions. So that was AI before we had neural networks and large language models. It says, not great at doing things, basically everything is currently advertised to do. So how good does something have to be before it's good enough? So yeah, the Rabbit device, that is basically allegedly fraud. I don't want to get into trouble myself there, but I understand that isn't what it purports to be. A lot of the services, when you try and ask it something, it says that service is down for maintenance. Somebody's even seen the source code to it, and it doesn't actually do what it's supposed to do. According to CoffeeZilla, he did an entire show on that. So Deshipu says, I'm old school. For me, AI is part of the code in a computer game that makes monsters move towards players. Exactly. And that can kind of look quite magical. We did a game last week, was it, where we were looking at some retro 1980s games, a zombies game for the BBC computer. And the zombies would walk towards you every turn. And that kind of seemed like AI. How did they know? They're just little characters on a screen. And it's very, very simple, like 2 lines of code. So David says, AI is really useful for writing bedtime stories for my granddaughter and getting recipes for my pressure cooker pulled pork. Exactly. So large language models can work like magic. They can take very large corpuses of text, and just by guessing the next word that's most likely to occur in a sequence of words, they can generate new content, new ideas. They can also hallucinate facts. So often in these things, there is like a temperature setting where you can have a slider between very precise but no creativity, and it essentially just recalls facts, or you can slide it to the right and say be more creative, and you can hallucinate. That might be something you want to happen. But if you're relying on it, what's interesting is a lot of companies like Microsoft with Bing and Google with their Gemini, they're now looking to replace standard search algorithms, which is just text database retrieval, with AI, large language models. That might lead to some kind of quite precarious situations where it might hallucinate a fact about something that somebody then takes to be real, and there's consequences for that. So Adam says the Humane Pen is just being used by those with memory issues. See, I'm not sure what the real use case behind the Humane Pin is, really. I don't get why that's better. So, Geronimo says, hi Kev, are you going to make a FreeCAD tutorial on designing a smart chassis the same way you did for Fusion 360? Yes. So I've been learning FreeCAD, and there's a few things in there that I find a bit quirky at the moment, and I've had it crash quite a few times, so I'm hoping that stabilizes a little bit. I understand it's free open source software, but it does need to be quite reliable if I want to be able to use it in anger. But I'm very impressed with what it can do so far, and I know that this topological naming problem has now been resolved, so that should also make it a lot more usable. If you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. There's just a feature in there that will make it a lot more usable for people. Another question there from Dan. So what maker YouTube channels do you follow that you'd recommend watching? That's a great question. I like a lot of channels that make things that I can't make. So I'm not very good at woodworking, so I'll watch ones like Zyla Foxlin, for example. She makes things like a Airstream trailer, for example, that actually got stolen, and it was only the fact that she had an Apple AirTag hidden somewhere in it that she was able to track it and find it. But she makes things like that, makes violins and things, guitars, boats as well. So things with wood, I'm quite impressed with. I can't do that. I also try to learn about what makes a good video. So my channel doesn't perform very well in general because I do lots of live streams and they're not edited. So people tend to like content that's like really tightly edited. And you can see that video I did about the Raspberry Pi AI kit, that's performed really well for my channel. compared to other channels, it's probably not very good, but for my channel, that's performed really well. It's because it's really concise. It's only a couple of minutes long, so it's not a big ask of people's times. My live streams tend to be about an hour long because I choose them to be, and that can also put people off. But yes, I do like watching. So there's a couple of people I'm looking forward to meeting next week at Open Source. So that's Jamie and Jay from Wicked Makers. They are fantastic. They make a lot of Halloween type props using animatronics. So they're fantastic. There's a lot of artistry that goes into that. I also like NerdForge. What's her name? Is it Martina and Hansa? They create fantastic builds. Really, really artistically made as well. So I want to copy what they do from an artistic point of view. I want to make my build so they're not just like a 3D printed thing and there's no finish to it. So for example, my robot chip that's just here on the desk, 3D printer, you can see the original 3D print color hasn't kind of got a paint job on it. So that's what I'd look to those channels to see. How do you make like a distressed look? How do you make like a Star Wars looking robot, all sort of distressed and so on. So they're the kinds of things I would watch. So trying to think if there's any other ones that we watch regularly, but yeah, Wicked Makers is one of my favourite channels to watch there as well. So Pete says, hi Alex, can you send the eBay link to the robot again? I can't find the link. There we go. I don't know if you've got that, Alex, if you've answered that. So Donkey Poop Dragon says, I've used object recognition tools to control servo motors, and that's been very useful. So, yeah, so things like face tracking. There's a lot of people who asked a question on that video about the AI kit. They said, apart from object detection, what else can it do? That's what it can do. That's what it's designed to do. So asking what else it can do, that's, to me, the wrong question. Like, it's how do you use what it does? So, for example, if you want to face track, that's very easy to do on the AI kit. It's been designed to use face tracking and object detection models. So if you want to have a camera that moves left and right, pans up and down, pans and tilts, it can take the location of your face within a frame, and if I move my face there, it can track the camera so that my face is always centered in the frame. So that could be a useful use of object tracking, for example. Let's have a see what else we have on here. Lentil and bacon soup. That's always a good one. So David says, I was looking to put together a poor man's Kubernetes cluster with Alpine OS running on the Pis to scale up as needed. Yeah, so Kubernetes is quite memory intensive before you even launch any containers on there. So I've found that Docker is far more efficient to run on Raspberry Pis because they have up to 8 gigs, and that's the absolute ceiling of RAM that you have on them. If you have some of the older Raspberry Pis, the 3s and 4s, they're like limited to 1 gig. Kubernetes requires about 2 gigs to run on Raspberry Pis, as I understand it. So you have lots of features in Kubernetes, but do you actually need them? If you just want to have containers deploy and automatically scale, you can do all that with Docker Swarm as well. So I found it's easier to learn on Docker and then apply that knowledge to Kubernetes later on. I use my little Raspberry Pi cluster that's just there and the other one that's just there. They both run Docker Swarm. So Photos, I've heard about recall from this morning's Explain Computers video, and it's the worst idea I've ever heard. Right? It is a terrible idea, isn't it? Why would you want to take screenshots and then have to process that to remove information, but then keep other bits of information just so that you might want to search things? If you think about Microsoft, have had a search engine optionally on Windows for quite a while now. I remember it having Windows searches being like a feature you had to install separately, and it would like text index all your files, for example. And then that was, before we had security concerns. Some people don't want all their content being indexed in that way because they have to then think about, well, what do I want to remove from that index? What do I need to make sure is hidden? Things like your social security number, your bank account details and things, or passwords that you might have stored. There's not everything you want to have in a single place necessarily. And if I'm doing a live stream and it takes a picture of this and things in the background there, do I want that to be indexed? That might be something I don't want to happen, and particularly the amount of space it takes up for that use that feature that you may or may not use. And again, for the potential for hackers to use that as a honeypot is massive. They'll want to do everything they can to get at that. I also feel that Microsoft will end up selling this data to advertisers, and we can already see that Microsoft has started to embed advertisements in the start menu, and I would take exception to that as well, because if you're buying an operating system for a computer, really that's what you want it to do. You don't want any bloatware, any cruft, any extra stuff that's going to take away your bandwidth that you might have to pay for. Say you're paying for your bandwidth over a cellular network and you have to pay for every byte of data that goes across. Them adverts are going to take up your data and you're going to pay for that. So that's not great if you can't switch that off. And you might not want to have advertisements pestering you. There was was it Futurama episode, I think one of the very first ones, where advertisers could send adverts to your brain while you sleep, and you would have these adverts in your dreams, and it was kind of like a throwaway silly thing. But where do adverts end? When is it okay to have adverts, and when is it not okay to have adverts? For me, it's like we're happy with adverts being in magazines and newspapers. We're happy for those to be in between videos that we watch, so we don't have to pay a subscription to watch a video series. We can just watch it and have to, the price we pay is just watching a few adverts. And even in some like games on the phone, they're a bit of a pain, and that's really how we see adverts. But the alternative is that we pay for everything outright and there are no adverts. I think where adverts can be even more annoying is when you pay for them to not be in there, like on Amazon Prime, and then they put them in and you have to pay extra again to remove them. That to me is like crazy. Same with Netflix. If they start putting adverts in, that would be really irritating, because you're paying for a service that is advert free. So there can be too much adverts, I think. People start to dial out pretty quickly, and it devalues the rest of the experience as well. So you might notice when guessrobots.com is actually up and running, there are now no adverts on there. I decided to bite the bullet. I thought it's not really worth. I got about £50 a month revenue from that, but I thought it decreases the experience for the user, and really I want the website to be the best place to learn about robotics, so I decided to take that out. So Adam says that I need an assistant for reminding me about electronic values. So what you actually need is a Robot Maker's Almanac, which we've made an absolute ton of these. I think we've taken about 70 to 100 of these to open source. Somewhere in here I've actually got, it's not a great effort if I can't actually find it. Let me just find the index. So resistor values is on page 40, there we go. So yeah, if you had a Robot Maker's Almanac, you could basically just get the values for the resistors just from there. So these will be sale very soon, I promise. Great, we've got Matt C. Thank you for subscribing to the channel, appreciate that. So Ford says, stuff like this is why I'm happy to be a Linux Mint user now. Absolutely, and I think there's a lot of people who are getting put off and quite annoyed by Microsoft's route of going down the everything is adverts. Let's just squeeze every penny we can out of the user. Interesting, Apple haven't gone down that route. So Finn says, found about Open Recall this morning on GitHub. Yeah, Charles says he doesn't trust Microsoft. I mean, Microsoft have always been very capitalist. That's what they are all about. I remember back in the day when there was the Novell networking platform, and there was Microsoft Windows NT as the networking platform. And Novell had a very tight licensing model. If you didn't have enough licenses, you couldn't run and connect extra clients to your server. And Microsoft were like, we're going to have this true up thing where you
What do you want me to play?
You can have this true up thing where you can essentially just pay at the end of the year, and they're not really going to check up on you. It's quite loose, and that was to get people off NetWare and onto Microsoft Windows NT. Years later, they would then absolutely lock down that. So that meant that they kind of went back to the Novell NetWare, wanted to squash them as competition. That's quite a robust way of doing business, isn't it? I guess. Adam says it looks like cover flow. The time machine thing. Yes, it does. So we can't trust corporations in the world. Then who can we trust? Quite. So I think what's interesting is the backlash has worked. So there were two issues. The Windows recall, Microsoft have taken a step back and said it's now opt-in. I suspect they'll quietly bury this at some point. And then Adobe have sought to clarify their use of people's content to generate AI models from. So another question there for Martin. What project would you like to create next? That's a great question, Martin. So I've got a whole list of projects. Let me get my Trello list up and I shall tell you a few things I'll be looking to do over the next couple of months. So let's have a see. So I was thinking about doing, ironically enough, an AI Walkman. So you've got like your Walkman, a bit like the humane pin or the rabbits. I thought, how could we do this properly? So what I'd be looking to do is put something like a Raspberry Pi 5 inside a Walkman, like a retro 1980s Walkman type case, even with the headset and the microphone. And we would run Ollama on that. It would have a battery pack so it could run for an amount of time. And you could press a button and you could ask it a question. It could do the speech to text, run it through Ollama and then back out as an answer. I thought that'd be quite fun. We could even have an optional camera so it could see things if we wanted it to. So I was going to look at that, but it would all be on device, nothing going up to the cloud. So that's probably one of the things I'll be looking at next. LDME rocks, just need some drivers. That's the Linux thing, isn't it? Yes. Amazon is looking for bigger personal risk users than Amazon is looking to be a bigger personal risk to users than Microflop. But the thing, I guess the thing is, it's the value exchange, isn't it? So we are okay to an extent. So if you use ChatGPT, the questions you type in, they are actually used to train the model further. In the same way that if you use Google, the things that you search for, tell Google they use that information to improve their search. And if the result of that is that the search is better, the results of the large language model are better, then you kind of don't mind that because you're getting that value exchange, and particularly if you're not paid for it, if it's just free to use, you don't mind so much. But if you're paying hundreds of pounds, say you're a small business, a small design business, and you're using the Adobe Creative Cloud for your entire team, and that's costing hundreds of pounds a month, if not thousands, and then, thank you, Amal, for subscribing. If you're using their tools and you're paying for that, and then they are taking your content that you've created, and they are going to feed that into their generative AI products, and it will generate content very similar to what's been fed into it because that's how they work. And they're not going to pay you for the license for that. That doesn't seem to me a fair exchange of, a fair trade. So I would take exception to that, particularly if you have to license from them stock images from things like Adobe Stock. They're not just letting you use them. So yeah, I think there is a fair exchange, a fair trade when it comes to these things. But we do like, as end users, large language models like ChatGPT to be really accurate and really, really good. And they need to get some corpus of text that is good to start from. And how do they do that if they have to pay themselves for it? The product would end up being astronomically expensive. So there becomes a point where you think, well, how do we go about this in a sensible kind of way? And this is kind of what's happening at the moment. We're kind of feeling our way through this. So, well, thanks for that, Adam. Appreciate that. Well, trying to text my phone in landscape mode is no fun. I'm with you on that one. Is Ada still around? The language? I'm sure it is. I'm not sure what the use case of that is that would be better suited than another more modern language, maybe. Not sure. I've not used that myself. So Ford has some YouTuber friends, albeit those in the opening closing logo community. Yes, that's a thing. Opening and closing logo community. I'm not sure what that is, actually. I consider Chris to be a friend too. Oh, he is the best. He's a really sweet guy, Chris. Just in case you've not already gathered that. Chris from Explaining Computers, Chris Barnett. So Adam says, how good? If it actually works correct all the time. It has to work correct all the time. That's a really difficult problem to solve. Nothing works 100% of the time. 100% of the time. that's a kind of an impossible ask. If you work in IT, you'll know this to be true. So if we have servers that we provide to our customers, then they won't stay up 100% of the time. That's impossible. You can try to achieve that. You might get like 5 nines reliability. You pay a very large price for that, but you'll still have that like 0.001% where they are not planned downtime. So, and then that's just talking about up and down time being correct. You can be precise. So you could be accurate but not precise. So you could talk about something and you could talk about that accurately, but your level of precision is off. Those two things can be true at the same time. And I think AI has that kind of problem. And even with people, so if I'm talking to you and I say something and you misunderstand it, or I misunderstand your response to it, we're humans. We're more evolved than AI. How do we expect AI to be even better than that if we can't do that 100% accurately ourselves? Language is full of all kinds of problems. We see this in IT with requirements. So as a project manager, my day job is to take projects and deliver them. And the stages of project management is you'll have like a design stage. Before the design stage, you have a requirements gathering stage. So what is it you want this thing to do eventually? And requirements, the good thing about requirements is they're easy to write. The bad thing about requirements is good requirements are very hard to write because people use all kinds of loose language rather than very specific language. And specific verbose language doesn't make for very easy communication. And you have to look at the law to see if you try and be really specific and precise in your language, you get this kind of legalese. You don't get nice, clear communication. So language is a really difficult way of communicating. And if we're looking to do that with machines, then that's a very difficult problem. So having them work correctly all the time, well, we can't even do that ourselves. That's why I think that's a really interesting statement to make, Adam. I'm agreeing with you, and I'm also thinking at the same time that's very difficult to achieve. I also agree that bacon is like magic too. That's got to be a quote. I think we need that on a t-shirt. Bacon is like magic. So unless it's cooked by Americans and it's just wasted matter. I like snappable bacon, that's my thing. If you can snap it, then it's good bacon. So Ford says, I recently had ChatGPT generate a biography for Steven Seagal if he became a character actor instead of cranking out direct-to-video action B-movies, and boy, did it deliver. I've got to see that. I used to like Steven Seagal back in the day until he went absolutely bat crazy. Does he live in Russia now or something? I remember there was a time when there was some actor stood very close to him, and he sort of turned to this actor instead, just standing in my chi. That's Steven Seagal all over. Very, very peculiar person. So David says, I love FreeCAD. I love FreeCAD. I'm such a noob with it. Yeah, it's a difficult package to learn. I think just because of all the different workspaces, for me, they don't really add a lot of value, like the number of them. If you go into something like Fusion 360, they're very, very discrete, the workstations that you have, the different like ways of working on the screen. Like you've got a design for solid models, there's a mesh modeling workspace as well, and then there is like the simulation spaces, but they're very different, and the rendering one as well. So Adam says that XF makes the Christmas tree rocket. XF, I'm not. Oh, Zala Fox then. Yes, she did the Christmas tree rocket as well. I definitely couldn't do that. So, oh yeah, bathroom update. Everything's just about cleaned up. My nostrils are getting fried by cleaning chemicals. I bet it looks ideal though. So Nick Badger says, did you enjoy Maker Central? I absolutely did. Yes, really great experience. I got to have a play in the hacky racers, the little go-karts that are made out of like cardboard boxes and things. That was particularly fun. And I also got to meet a couple of other YouTubers I've not met in person before. So I had a good chat with what's the guy's name? Matt Denton, who does the large Lego things and also built that massive Mantis robot. I was talking to him quite a bit about that. I also got to speak to James Bruton. He's another YouTuber friend I have. I interviewed him on this channel quite a while ago, but he's very nice in person as well. Right up my street, as you can imagine. And I also met, I spoke to Zyla Fox, then we had a quick selfie just in the middle of, I think she was just running about somewhere. And who's the other guy? Matt Gray as well. I spoke to him. He's also going to be at Open Source. He's like another British YouTuber. So yes, I spoke to quite a few people there. Really enjoyed it. Very nice atmosphere. So Deshbu says, have you tried OpenMV for anything? I've not yet. OpenMV, Open Machine Vision. I've used OpenCV, but I've not used OpenMV for anything yet. It's definitely something I want to look at. Oh yes, James says, how did you get to know Marina from Python Simplified? So we were chatting on Twitter for quite a long time, and she'd said to me when she starts her YouTube channel proper, she'll have me on as a guest, and she did. I was one of the first people to go on her channel as a guest. I think I'm the only other person that Chris from Explaining Computers has had on as like a cameo on his channel as well. So when he did the Raspberry Pi video, we were talking about how to use it for like Microsoft Teams, and he gave me a call, and I was on his video. But I'm looking to do another collaboration with him, hopefully in July sometime, so that'll be pretty fun. But yeah, Marina, she's a very, very smart cookie, very good with Python, very good at explaining what she's learned. So she's doing like a computer science degree at the moment, learning Python and then teaching Python on her YouTube channel. So yeah, we definitely want to check out Marina from Python Simplified if you've not already. It's very, very good. So yes, who else we got on? So she's another YouTuber friend I guess I've got there. So yeah, I think we just talk a lot on social media. That's how I've learned how I've met a lot of my colleagues. So yeah, so David says, thanks for the Docker container idea for Raspberry Pi. I agree definitely about the memory footprint for K8s. Yeah, I think there's like a limit. There's a scaled down version, but for older Raspberry Pis you can still use them, just with Docker. Earn money while sleeping. That was the idea. That's why I put advertisements on kesrobots.com and also on smartsfan.com. But in the end, I thought that's not the best way, really, of going about that. So Ford says, imagine having a dream about your crush and then getting interrupted by Target ads for flowers. Exactly, that could be a thing. I'm sure when Elon Musk gets his Neuralink, whatever it's called, thing up and running, and everybody's got one of those brain inserts, then that could be a thing. With what Apple charge for hardware, they don't need to insert adverts. Nobody needs to insert adverts, but it's just extra revenue, isn't it? It's kind of an easy one. I mean, Apple do have one of the largest ad revenue networks on mobile phones. So when you go onto your Apple app store, Apple have an advertisement network. I think Steve Jobs originally set it up. He wanted to have like really polished adverts, and the advertisers were like, we're not going to spend that kind of money on our adverts. So but they still have all the back end to all that. So yeah, it's a thing. BJ says, I need to measure 0.5 to 4.5 volts on a D1 Mini. Can you just add another resistor to A0? That's what I understand is the best way to measure voltages, is to use resistors so that the voltage, even at its highest, will be up to the highest reference voltage that you can read in. So if it's 3 volts, for example, if you have 5 volts as the amount you want to measure, you can get like a 2K and a 1K resistor and use them in a kind of, I think you have the 1K going to ground and the 2K going across it, and then you can read in the values and it'll drop it down to like 3.3 volts, and therefore you're not going to blow up your microcontroller. And then you can read in through one of the analog pins, like you said, the A0, and you can see what value that is, and it'll give you a value between 0 and whatever range is it like 65,356, whatever the value is. So yeah, you can definitely do that. Adam says the same thing, 0 to 3.3 volts. So yeah, if you just read that in, it should be fine. So VJ says, not what I'm asking to Adam. Was it an answer? It was pointing out you could read directly voltages for 3.3. If you want to read between 5 and 4.5, then you need to drop them down a bit. And that does mean that your accuracy is going to be a little bit off, but only marginally. So that's how a lot of these battery level monitors work. They just read in the battery level and just drop a resistor across it. It does mean that it's constantly going to be chopping that and kind of draining some of that. So if it's a battery one, that will actually make your battery drain quicker ultimately. Not a lot, but it will. So you need a massive battery to run a Raspberry Pi 5 for any length of time. It would reduce the user experience. Of running a portable music player. So you can. So I've actually packed it away because I'm taking it with me. I've got a battery that I ran a Raspberry Pi on, and it runs for about 4 or 5 hours, and it's just about 3 18650s in like a little USB power bank thing. 4 or 5 hours is good. I think that's more than acceptable for a Raspberry Pi. Cool. So Vin says the update most is 99 over the year. The update most is 99 over the year. The most update time is 9 nines. Is that right? Yeah, 99.99999. There you go. Stupid phone. 99.999. I'm with you on that one. So you can never get 100%. It's one of those things that users expect 100% uptime. Very difficult to achieve in reality. Even Facebook has downtime occasionally. So my Beelink Micro PC is very reliable. Running high availability on a Node-RED and MQTT. Yeah, that's usually the way to get around these things, is not to have like reliance on a single point, but to have multiple. High availability will get you there. There's just a cost to that, isn't there? I think the first one was closer to the truth. So yes, he does live in Russia now. Stephen's also the best buddies with Putin. Yeah, I understand so. What is it with these like dictators and their like love of odd celebrities? I know that there's other dictators out there in other parts of the world who are obsessed with like baseball players and basketball players and so on. Adam says he's going to be senile now and people need to voice over his lines. Yeah, I understand that happened in one of his movies, didn't it? They also tried to like squish him because he's quite a heavy guy now, Stephen. So the years haven't been kind to him and his waistline. So they use like lots of like changing the aspect ratio of the video so that it looks like slightly squished in. But it's really obvious that that's what they've done. There was another actor, was it Roger Moore? Apparently he didn't like running on film. And he would have like a body double just to do the running scenes because he just thought he ran funny or something quirky. So Richard says, are you concerned about the amount of data that's going to be stored in the cloud for every what? For every user, is that? So cloud, again, it's one of those value propositions, isn't it? I like using cloud because I could lose my entire laptop. Say my laptop gets stolen. Everything that I have worked on is up in the cloud somewhere else. And that's a value to me. If I had a fire in my house and it wiped out everything that I own here, a lot of the stuff I've created, all that value I created is in the cloud. So for me, cloud is a value in that way. I don't like the idea that some people might be then mining through my data and trying to get value themselves and then selling that on. That doesn't seem to be great. We have a thing in the UK where we have like this National Health Service and all our medical data is stored centrally. And the idea is you can go into any hospital and they can pull up your records and you can get help right away for free because you're paying for it in your taxes. But they can sell that data to other companies for free. And that doesn't seem to me to be either ethical or moral or, great as an end user, the person who owns that data. They can just sell that on. Similarly with if I own a vehicle, I have to have that vehicle with a registration plate. A vehicle registration plate in the UK, that's like the DVLA. And they can sell that data to car parks so that they can have automatic number plate recognition. So when you drive in, they can clock your number plate. They can look up your number plate and see who you are. And if you drive off or you don't pay, they know who to send the bill to. I didn't agree to that. I have to have a registration because that's the law, but I don't then allow that to be just used willy-nilly by other companies. And they're selling these databases for a lot of money because it's easy money for them. So that's where I have objections to some privacy things where I have to do something because it's the law, but then they can take that data and they can sell it on to increase their operating money. That doesn't seem a great thing for me. So yeah, I am concerned about that side of things, but not so much just storing my files securely. That's up to me to store them securely in the first place and then just store a copy in the cloud. So Charles says, to be fair, Microsoft stems back to when they had the code of the operating system to make third-party browsers run slower. Yes, I do remember that. And that's when I started dabbling with Linux, and I only use Linux. So for me, I use all the operating systems. I use Windows for work because that's what they use. I use Macs for content creation and for doing YouTube. And I use Linux on Raspberry Pis because they work best with that as well. So I use all the things and I just try and see what's the best value and gives me the best bang for buck. Suppose there's he rather got very cuddly and snuggly with Putin than making movies. Meanwhile, I spotted a new Jean-Claude Van Damme movie available for rent while I was browsing Prime recently. Fantastic. Yeah, I think we have very similar movie taste there, Ford. I used to like JVD as well. So judging by the trailer, he's still got it. Yeah, he still works out, doesn't he? So Ford also says, I've subjected myself to Seagal's filmography for over this spring and my brain is still recovering. I like he's watching. It's like I'm watching somebody's decade and a half long life crisis. I did like that Under Siege. Like that was one of his best movies. Hard to Kill. They were some of the ones I remember watching when I was a student. So in regards to Chris, the Pi 5 video he did well, and he had a chat as you had, as well as the chat you had with him on his channel. I started watching it. I see. Awesome. Yeah. I'll be waiting with bated breath for the next collab. Yes, I'm not sure that's going to be, but he's a very sweet guy, Chris. Like I said, very. He gave me a lot of YouTube advice. I had when we were doing the Raspberry Pi 5 video before that, we had like about an hour. We were supposed to have like 10 minutes of a chat, and it ended up being like an hour and a half or something, just because we have very similar tastes and things. We have very similar ideas, and yeah, he's just a really very nice person. For me, the fact that he gave his time to me for nothing, just because. He's a fan of the show as well. That blew my mind. So absolutely adorable man. Completely agree. So yeah, another one says Ford might be time to wrap your towel around your head. You're going off topic. I think it's ask me anything. We can talk about anything on here. So from where can I learn reinforcement learning without a robot, just like Isaac Asimov or Gazebo with ROS 2? So we did a show on how to build. I think it was with a Jetson Nano, how to do reinforcement learning. And TensorFlow is probably one of the easier ways to learn. There's loads of good tutorials out there for doing like TensorFlow, how to build your own object detection or just reinforcement learning. You can do that. Gazebo with ROS 2, they're quite advanced topics. We have dabbled on that. I did do a ROS 2 course on this channel, but I don't think we did much on Gazebo on there. But yeah, so hope that answers some of your question. Hi, Draker G Robotics from Guatemala. How you doing? Beginner projects for SLAM. Yeah, SLAM is a really advanced topic. So SLAM, simultaneous localization, and what's the M stand for? SLAM, not navigation. I can't remember off the top of my head. I get this live streaming brain where only half my brain works. I think it's because there's so much going on there. So SLAM is all about how do you find out where you are in a particular environment. So if you're in this summer house, for example, how do you know which wall you're closest to? So I typically have like a LiDAR to give you that raw point cloud, and then use some very clever algorithms, which is what the SLAM algorithms do. So they can simultaneously localize where you are, and mapping, that's what the M stands for, and they can map your environment. So they can take that cloud of points and build a map, and then if you move, they also know to move that map as well, using these like nearest neighbor. They can use lots of triangles to build out where they think you are. So as you move, they can very accurately position you in that map whilst building the map at the same time. Those algorithms are pretty hardcore maths. So and there's quite a few of them as well, depending on which environment you want to use. You can just use pure cameras to build that, but usually something like a LiDAR is the best way to go. We have done a few of these on the channel. The easiest way is to use something like VM, because they can basically just give you this as a building block. You can just say, I've got a LiDAR, plug that in by USB. It can say, I've recognized that, here's the map, and here's the where you are in that map. So you don't need to do anything else like with ROS, it just works. Love that. So from Chile, hey, how you doing from Chile, RS? So Richard says, are you concerned about the amount of data, like pointless data, such as blurred photos that's going to be stored in the cloud, but actually is a huge server farm burning electricity and creating heat. So that's a really interesting point. Do you know for every Google search that you do, it takes about a kilowatt of energy for that search to return to you? So you could boil a kettle with the amount of energy it takes to do a single Google search. And when you type in the characters on Google search, each character stroke is an individual search. So just think about how much energy you're burning through just using Google's autocomplete. They do use a lot of green energy now, so that energy is being harvested from the sun or through wind power, through other wave power and so on, but still it's energy that could be used on other things. When we get to AI, it's another order of magnitude amount of power that's required. Excuse me, typically because we don't have the specialized chips yet. These neural engines are very, very specific in how they work, and we don't have a lot of hardware that's specific to them as yet. So even like Mac M4, Jeff Gehling did quite a few shows recently about TOPS. So how many tera operations per second can your CPU do? Like an M4 chip, is it 13 TOPS it can do, something like that? I'm sure somebody will correct me in the comments. That's not a lot of TOPS. The Google Coral chip, which I have here, that can do 3 TOPS, 3 tera operations per second. So that's a lot of operations per second, but you still need even more than that to get a quick response on your models, particularly large language models. They are very, very intensive CPU wise. So yeah, what's the value of that? What do you get for that? And is it worth spending all that energy on it? So sorry for repeating, but I wonder if you've ever tried OpenMV board for anything. So I've not used that yet. I would look into that. If I had one, I probably would do a show on that. I've not used one yet. So if you know of a good one, you can recommend one, I will definitely take a look at that. So VJ says, I found Onshape to be very easy to create STLs for 3D printers. Yeah, there's a lot of good tools out there. I had to dabble with, we were talking about Fusion 360 and FreeCAD, and I've also played around with like Tinkercad as well. I think there's a couple of others that I tried, and they're all quirky. None of them are like the perfect environment. They all have the pros and cons. I like Fusion 360 the best. That's what I'm most familiar with, but it's pretty pricey if you buy that commercially. There are free versions for hobbyists as well. David says, I use IOSafe DR drives to support my personal cloud, peril protection against flood and fire. Awesome. So I do have a very large storage server. It's like 5 SSDs, all 1 terabyte each. I say large, that's probably not large by today's standards, but it's very fast. So I store all my edited videos and raw content on there. But that's one copy of it. I then have another slower spinning disk that a larger capacity that can store backups of that. But they're all here. So if something goes wrong, you lose the lot. So I do use like Google Cloud and or Google Drive and Apple iCloud and OneDrive as backups as well. Sam says, I had a call on my work phone and they asked where they got the data. They replied, a data broker, and my response was, stop stealing data. Yeah, it's always worth having a drill down to see where they have actually got your details from, because even though we opted out of the EU, we are still covered by GDPR, which is now embedded into our UK law as well, which is the General Data Protection legislation. So what was that question there? What simulator robots are you recommending to us to use? There's quite a few. You could use Unity if you just want to build a simple model and move it around. And Gazebo is a good one from ROS, but that does require quite a lot of knowledge of ROS and ROS 2 to use. So yeah, Unity is probably the way to go. I would think nowadays. Happy to hear differently on that. Yeah, Adam says mapping. Thanks for that. Hey Donald, how's it going? And Ford wraps towel from head. What's your favourite Linux distro? That's a great question. So I bought Slackware as the very first Linux that I used, and this would have been about 1994, that kind of period. It can't have been out very long, and I bought it on like a CD-ROM, and that was the first Linux I had experienced too. I quite like Ubuntu as just like a daily drive desktop. but I guess Debian, which is what Raspberry Pi OS is based on, is probably my favourite one. Just that's the one I'm most familiar with because of Raspberry Pi. So that's probably one I would go with the most. I've also been a big fan of FreeBSD and Solaris before Oracle bought it out. Solaris is a very nice operating system. But yeah, FreeBSD, that's what macOS is based on. That's a very nice, very, very robust. A lot of web servers run on FreeBSD, so I can highly recommend that. And that's not technically Linux either. That's like more pure Linux, more Berkeley Unix. So can you point to any resources to learn SLAM as a beginner? So once I fixed kevsrobots.com and got that back up and running, I guess I probably just need to reboot a couple of servers behind me to get that working. I do have a SLAM course on there, so you can check out kevsrobots.com /learn / and there's a course on there on SLAM. You can check that one out. Cool. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to cover off actually, because we're getting close to the time to wrap things up. So we were talking about AI and what companies should change their rules so that they can use your content. Should they be allowed to do that? We talked about what that line is between what lines do we draw with AI, what should it be able to do and what should it not be able to do. We like AI to be accurate, but we also don't want to have it steal our content to make that accuracy. We want to have the freedom to opt out. We talked about Windows recall. We talked about the Raspberry Pi AI kit briefly as well. And we talked about the Adobe license changes too. So yeah, very excited about the Apple releases tomorrow to see what choices they make to build AI into their products. They've already had AI for decades. They just called it something differently, but now things are recognized as AI and there's a bit of buzz around that. I think they felt that they have to call some of their features AI based. So it'll be interesting to see what they come up with there. And Charles says, what 3D printer would you recommend for a first-time buyer? Really interested in building our custom cases for various microcontrollers, microprocessors with sensors that I've been playing around with. So I've been really happy with the Ender Pro series. If you have the money, it is worth buying a Prusa. They are the best printers, I think, for the money. They are just a lot of money. You spend a lot of time futzing about with printers if you buy poor quality ones. So here's the build plate for my Ender Pro 3 that I've got next to me, and the amount of times I've had to like dial in the bed leveling on that. I think there's even like a little dimple in the back there where the head was hot and pressed into it. So I need to buy another one of these. They're about £25, these magnetic build surfaces, but they do last quite well. You can see that the fact it's got these like little marks on there. That one needs peeling off, but I've not had it quite dialed in. It's gone a bit too far in. So yeah, if you don't mind spending lots of time messing about with the settings, you can probably get away with a cheaper one. VJ says he likes his Bamboo A1, so you can take these recommendations. So yeah, I like the Ender Pro ones. If I was going to buy a new one, I'd buy a Prusa. So yeah, that's what I would probably recommend right now. Peter says, if you could collaborate with a manufacturer to build a commercial robot, what would you do? So I am collaborating currently with a commercial robot manufacturer. I'm going visiting them in 2 weeks' time. So VM, I'm going meeting them in New York. They write software for robots. What would I do? I've always liked the idea of having a robot that could walk around, that could interact like a C-3PO or an R2-D2 type robot, one that could follow you around and be of some value. And there are lots of challenges with that. One of the biggest problems is power. So how can you have enough power in this thing running on batteries with all these servos without it being really heavy and without the battery only lasting like a really short amount of time? They're really difficult problems to solve, and that's one of the things when I look to like Atlas or Optimus, these new robots that are being demonstrated. How do they solve them problems? And a lot of the time they haven't solved them, they just cheat. They have them wired all the time, so they don't have to address those issues. So I'll probably work on something like that, like a larger scale model. A lot of the things I do are desktop size, smaller robots, so I probably would want to learn and work with a larger manufacturer to build larger robots that can do more interesting, more valuable things, I guess. Great question, by the way. See if there's anything else. So yes, the other thing worth noting, so next week and the week after there'll be no live streams because I'll be over in San Francisco and then New York. So I will film, I will take lots of videos and so on. I will certainly share the trip to VM online. I think there'll be a nice little video about that to come. Ford says I also want my own C3PO type robot. So C3PO is actually behind me there. You can just see I've got a head. I put some googly eyes on him as well because why not? We've got another recommendation there as well from Donald. He says the Elgu Neptune 4 Pro 3D printer works fine. Paul says it gets awfully lonely here in space. That's it. So yes, I'm very much looking forward to open source. That's going to be my world for the next couple of days. We're flying out very, very soon on Tuesday next week, and we'll be back to the end of June, in fact. So almost traveling the entire month of June. It's going to be really, really fun. I can't wait to get stuck in and meeting some of the big YouTubers over there at the open source event. So yes, thank you so much for watching. Thanks for the interesting questions. Hope that was an interesting show to you, a bit of a different show. And I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.